Hardware Hound here. Happy Halloween 2016. So, I don't know if I'm really starting a tradition or not, but I did a Star Trek captain, Starship captain last year, and somebody made a comment about being a Star Trek fan, and I was like, you know what? I'll show you. I'm a Star Wars fan too. So, hey, figured do another dress up and another review. And this time, we have the NZXT S340 Elite computer case. So the big thing about this case is that it's VR. Now, if anybody knows anything about VR, it released earlier this year, and it's supposed to be some really huge, amazing thing. I mean, VR is something that causes the game to surround us, penetrate us. I mean, it binds the entire gaming experience together. So, of course, it was meant to be a big deal. Now, some of the sales haven't been as good as what people would have expected, and some say the odds may not be very good for VR, but never tell me the odds. 3,720 to 1? Alright guys, so let's go ahead and talk about this case, talk about what it's doing, why I think this is actually an excellent case, but you know, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but we'll get into those details. So, either way, I think it's time that we demonstrate the full power of this VR station. So, the first thing, the most obvious thing about this case is this really nice glass panel here. Anybody who's had like a plastic window knows that the plastic can get to where it looks streaky, doesn't look as nice. Yeah, you can get fingerprints on the glass, but it's just a little bit of Windex, and it makes it look good as new. So you might be familiar with the S340, and this case is going to be very similar to the S340. But it's going to have a couple of little extra things. Now, initially, this is about an average mid-tower case. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts. NZXT even added some special modifications themselves. So let's go ahead and talk about a few of those things. And, you know, as always, if I had a little more space, I would take this thing apart and go through it. But we'll just go ahead and overlay some pictures because it's a little bit easier with the kind of setup I have. So first off, let's talk about the case size. Now, this is a straight mid-tower, and it's not a super huge case, and sometimes the pitfall with that is that you don't have a lot of room to build. One of the hardest things sometimes to do is getting your motherboard into the case, but that was no problem here. I had no issue sliding my motherboard in and getting it all to work, and I was really happy about that. Moving on to just a few other things here, we've got, of course, a PSU cover. And NZXT has an extra bracket so that you can screw the PSU to that bracket, slide the whole thing in, and then screw in the thumb screws. It makes it really easy to install a PSU that could otherwise be a little tricky to install. Now, some of the things that this S340 is doing differently is, for instance, and you can see it right here, we have an SSD tray that is facing the outside window. I love being able to show off my SSD. Hey, it may not match my build exactly, but it's like, I want to say, hey, look I got an SSD. And so right here you can see I got the Crucial MX300 sitting here loud and proud for all the world to see. I love that. But if you have more than one, you also have two mounts right here. So this case, being a mid-tower, it has a 120 millimeter fan in the back and 120 or up to 140 in the front. You can do up to a 280 millimeter cooler in the front. And as you can see here, I have the Deep Cool Captain EX, and it's got the 240 millimeter radiator. No troubles putting that radiator right in the front and having everything mounted, cables and the hoses running nicely. So it's great. It's a simple design that can easily get you a good build going. Now, there's a couple other things that I want to talk about. One of the other things is we've got some good dust filters. You got a big one here, and you got one here underneath the PSU so that it's keeping as much of the dust out of your system. I mean, it's a trap for dust, and so that way it's staying outside of your case rather than getting in, you know, covering all your components. So that's nice. And they cover all the inlets so that, you know, your exhale exhaust is not something you probably have to worry about as much. So you really want those intakes to be covered so you don't get a bunch of mess inside your case. So yeah, those are some of the main features, but one of the big things that I really want to talk about on this case that I loved was the cable management. Cable management was fantastic. So first off, NZXT has just a raised shroud to cover the cables that plug into your motherboard. instead of having like a rubber grommet type thing that you poke the cables through. I love this thing. I feel like it covers the cables better. And the big thing I love about it is my SATAs, I don't have to put them at a weird angle to get them through the cable management and then drop back behind the board. My SATAs are just going straight in and plugging in, and then the bend is very gradual going out the back where you can't see. That is fantastic. But then we get to talk about one more thing that the S340 did that is absolutely great. One of the things that I really love is the fact that they've got these new cable management clips. They're little plastic clips that have a hinge that open up. And once you do it, each of those hinges are compartmentalized to run your cables through. That thing worked fantastically. In fact, this was the easiest case I've ever had to make a super clean cable management setup. So, I mean, this case is a great case. But let's talk about one more thing that they're doing. Alright guys, let's talk about one more thing that this case is doing. Now, because they wanted this case to be VR, they did a couple of things that'll help. So first off, we have an HDMI port on the back. And that cable routes through, there's a little slot in the back of the case where you can poke the cable out and plug it into your graphics card. Now, having that loop sticking out the back of your case may not be the greatest, but it's still a great place to hide it since you're already going to have cable sticking out there anyway. And until graphics cards start having like micro HDMIs built into the inside, that's really the only way that you can do that. So that's another little thing that makes this case VR. The other thing NZXT did is they included a headset holder for your VR headset. Now I don't have a VR headset, and I don't know if I ever will have one because last time I even tried it, man, the motion sickness was real. But I do have just a casual headset, and it turns out this works really great. So here's the thing, when you have the cable out, I mean, you can't just let her go. I mean, you have a cable just sitting around and having all kinds of issues. So first you got to detach the cable. And once the cable's detached, you can actually wrap it around this headset holder, and you can split this puck up in half so that it takes less wraps to get around it. And then once you get this thing all nice and wrapped up and neat, then you can just throw your headset right there on top. And it's just a great way to hold something, you know, keep it out of the way, keep your cables from getting all tangled up, getting stepped on, rolled over by your computer chair. Honestly, I don't know why NZXT isn't selling that as a standalone product, because I think it'd be great as that. But, you know, it's especially going to be useful for VR. So, you know, these are tiny things that may not seem like a big deal, but the way that NZXT implements them, they actually are very, very great. The headset holder is magnetic, so it just slaps right there on the front of your case, no problem. Holds in place great. It doesn't slide when you got your headset on there, and honestly, that works with any metal case. So, I don't know. Maybe they should sell it as a standalone, but I think NZXT is doing a great job. So let's go ahead and try to wrap this review up. Alright guys, well I gotta say, NZXT should be proud of this technological terror that they've created. You know, the thing about this case is that it's kind of, it's got a lot of great features, it's got a lot of stuff going good for it, but the real problem with this case is really NZXT's other cases. You know, this case is priced between one of their H440 series and their other S340. So, you know, if you're trying to save every buck possible, then and you don't really need any of the VR stuff, then the S340 might be a good case for you. But if you're wanting a little more airflow, a little bit bigger size, then that H440 does cost a little extra, but, you know, it's not much more than this. But see, here's the thing. This is a VR-ready case, so even if you're not going into VR right now, what if you have that potential? A VR case could be great, you know, and that's the trick, isn't it? It's going to cost you something extra, but you probably expect that. So even though this case is a little more than the S340, it's going to give you enough features that's going to be worth it. And I think one of the big things is this glass panel is gorgeous. And you're not going to be able to get a nice glass panel on the original S340. So you gotta just spend a little bit extra. But here's the thing, that little bit of extra adds up to about $100. $99.99 on the NZXT website. And from what I've seen, the features that we have here, what this case is doing, how well it looks, I think that's a great price for this. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a steal, but I do think it's extremely fair. The only issue that I could personally say I had with this case is the actual hard disk drive mount does not have any anti-vibration in it. So you might hear your hard disk spinning up. But we're seeing SSDs get to a point where a lot of people who are building systems aren't even going to use a traditional hard drive anymore, even if they need a bigger capacity to store their games on. In fact, I've already seen comments at the Pure Overclock forums indicating just as much, that people are completely going SSD now. So even the minor con is something that might not affect the majority of high-end builders now. And if you're building a VR system, then you gotta have some high-end components. So yeah, I think this case is great. And because of that, there's no two ways about it, it is going to earn a Pure Overclock Editor's Choice Award. So, not a bad bit of review work, huh? You know, sometimes I even amaze myself. Man, no wonder he was so angry. Can't see anything in that helmet.